In 2012, Keith Linder and his girlfriend Tina had everything they wanted when they moved into their newly rented house in Bothell, Washington. It was a newer house, built just a few years earlier in 2005. Keith worked for Microsoft as a software engineer in a suburb near Seattle. Everything seemed to be going well for him and Tina. Everything should have been perfect, but instead, they were subjected to a living nightmare at the hands of a paranormal being they couldn't see. They began to notice strange things in and around the house after a few months. Keith and Tina both began to remark about their new home's strangeness. It began with the sound of a newborn coughing in the middle of the night. It seemed like it was coming from within the house, so they assumed it was the neighbors. They looked and looked, but the noise remained. They were constantly woken up at night by the coughing sounds of an unwell child. The coughing noises were faint, and Keith and Tina were able to explain them away as normal occurrences. Was it a cat? Or was it the home squeaking as the weather changed? But then things started to get out of hand. Items such as vehicle keys and tableware began to vanish. In the middle of the night, they would hear knocking noises. The couple began to suspect paranormal activity, but they reasoned that because the house was just 6 years old, it couldn't possibly be haunted. Keith stated that when he and Tina came downstairs in the morning, all of their kitchen cabinets were open. The arrival of objects that neither Keith nor Tina owned was the most mysterious occurrence. Linder claims that when he and Tina awoke, they would discover female jewelry and children's toys strewn about the house. They didn't have any children. After a home security system was built, the waking up and finding every kitchen cabinet door open, and the presence of things none of them owned still continued. Also, there was a black-like tar substance that appeared many times on the wall in Keith Linder's workplace office. Their suspicions were validated one night. Keith and Tina were sitting on the couch watching TV when their potted plant levitated a few inches off the ground, spun 360 degrees, then plummeted back to the ground. Their new residence was definitely haunted. After that, Keith said, there was no denying our house was haunted. Something was here. The hauntings intensified after the event with the potted plant. The pair was constantly awakened by loud bangs and crashes in the middle of the night. Keith would inspect the attic and basement for signs of foul activity, fearing catastrophic structural damage to their home, but he never discovered anything. As time passed, the hauntings became more common and more aggressive. Plates and silverware would hover off the dining room table before falling to the floor. Their potted plant levitated a few more times before finally falling to the ground and smashing. Doors began to slam and open incessantly, and random objects were thrown throughout the house. Sharp things such as scissors or kitchen knives were occasionally tossed across the room. Electrical problems were becoming more common, and one day all of the lights in the house exploded at the same time. Things began to darken, becoming almost diabolical in character. Strange runes and symbols would be scribbled on the walls when the couple returned home. Keith and Tina were not very religious people, although they did have a couple Bibles. On many instances, they discovered different versions of their Bibles torn apart, with the pages thrown about the house. The fire alarm went off one night as the two were preparing to go to bed. They dashed into the living room to discover their final surviving Bible on fire. The Bible's pages had been stuffed with a wooden cross, which was set to burn along with the book. The poltergeist's behaviors had progressed from annoying and frightening to life-threatening at this time. The Bothell Hell home may have burned down, with Keith and Tina inside if it hadn't been for the smoke alarm. Keith's bedroom door would open and close at random intervals, waking him up late at night or early in the morning and robbing him of much-needed sleep. The spirit's major purpose seemed to be to keep Keith awake and disrupt his life. And that's a common strategy for a poltergeist haunting that's attempting to drive the resident insane. Even when unplugged, his television would come to life on its own, going on and off at a high or low volume. Keith and Tina were cornered, but they continued to live their lives. They desired to maintain a normal social life. They decided to host a party and invited their friends as well as a few individuals from their neighborhood. The party went off without a hitch, but the wicked spirits were unfazed by the good cheer. Guests claimed they were being grabbed and touched by an unknown power. During this time, some people were pushed around. Others had their hair yanked. When one of their remaining potted plants levitated off the ground and was tossed across the room in full view of the guests, at this point they knew it was over. During his time at the Bothell house, Keith saw multiple phantom creatures. He stated the ghost of an apparently elderly woman, whom he initially encountered in the summer of 2012, was the most notable. Keith painted a clear picture of her. The gray lady's face is what he says he remembers most about the whole encounter. The thing I remember most about that whole experience is her face. She had a look of mischief. But she also had a look of being tired, confused, and scared. I truly believe she turned off my lights. I heard the switch go off. And it made a sound. And that sound reached my ears. During his time at the Bothell house, Keith had 3 encounters with this particular spirit. There were also multiple encounters with the spirit of a baby or young child, in addition to who he named the Grey Woman. Keith and Tina believe they heard its phantom hacking and voice all over the house. Keith and Tina realized it was time to seek expert assistance. They hired an exorcist in the hopes of blessing the house and removing the evil spirits. They were told by the exorcist that the ritual would aggravate the spirits. They made the decision to give it a try. The exorcism was successful, but only for a short time. Then hauntings started up again. Professional ghost hunters were contacted by the couple. They sought assistance from the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures program. They agreed to come to the house, with the demonic drawing drawn on the walls piquing their interest. They spent 5 hours researching the house, listening for electromagnetic pulses that usually indicate the presence of ghosts utilizing EVPs. They didn't discover anything, despite the fact that the Bothell house was featured in a show about haunted places in Seattle. Keith was depressed for a long time after this. He felt like he was going insane during the Ghost Adventures investigation. He contacted Don Phillips, a well-known paranormal investigator in the United Kingdom. Keith and Linda's story piqued Phillips' interest, so he boarded the next flight to Seattle. Phillips stayed in the Bothell house for over 3 weeks, determined to find evidence of the hauntings, unlike the Ghost Adventures crew who just stayed for 5 hours. He discovered just what he was looking for. Phillips recorded nearly 400 auditory recordings of the ghosts using multiple recording devices, 28 of which were direct responses to their questions. They even made direct contact with the apparitions. An older woman was the primary poltergeist. She had a rough look about her. Her hair was matted and her clothes were ripped. Her feelings were a mix of confusion, worry, and rage. They also encountered the ghost of a tiny child, who they assumed was the child who had been coughing at the start of their stay. According to local historians and paranormal researchers, the hauntings could be linked to an Irish community that existed on the property over a century ago. The families buried their deceased nearby, potentially causing the Bothell house to be plagued by ghosts. Further investigation revealed that a family lived in the Bothell home between 2008 and 2009. The wife of the family stated that her family had experienced similar events during their brief stay in the Bothell home. Phantom footsteps, doors banging, electronic and equipment malfunctions, shadowy figure sightings, and feeling of being watched, suicidal thoughts, and waking up in the morning to find every kitchen cabinet door open, were among the activities they encountered. Keith and Linda decided to call it quits in 2016 after more than 4 years of horror. They decided to end their relationship also. The hauntings had torn their relationship apart. Keith was able to find a new tenant for the Bothell house despite the hauntings. Paranormal activity is still happening in the house, according to the new residents. Keith has now moved on, but he claims that the ghosts of the Bothell house continue to haunt him. It's almost as if they've followed him everywhere, and he claims that the hauntings have left him permanently scarred. He's since written a book called The Bothell House, Poltergeist of Washington State, about his experiences. We will put a link below if you would like to check out the book. Also, we will put a link to his YouTube channel where he goes into more details of his encounters. He also has a second book in the works. Don Phillips also produced Demons in Seattle Uncovered, a documentary about the incident. So what do you think about the Bothell Hell House? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, please like and subscribe.